Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming along to this session on our bite-sized security blast. My name is Isaac and I'm ADM's resident speaker on all things Microsoft. However, today I'll be handing over to some of our in-house specialists to discuss some very useful tools that can help you improve your organization's security. Before I do that, I do want to briefly run through a little about ADM and why we're qualified to speak here today on these topics. So, we are a multi-award winning technology services company based in Canterbury and serving the southeast of the UK and now further beyond. We always seek to understand the challenges that our clients face and resolve them with the use of IT. And we've been doing that successfully for over 37 years now. We work with customers in various sectors, including professional practices, manufacturers, charity and education, as well as logistics and distribution. And we usually find the majority of our clients fall between 15 and 150 actual IT users. We also have over 70 members of staff, 3/4 of whom are technical or involved with service delivery. And every day, over 7,500 users across our 500 customers rely on our help desk to support their IT systems and their businesses. Many of our clients have been with us for over 20 years now. We're one of the most successful Microsoft resellers in the UK, being in the top 20 partners out of several thousand, and I'll run through that in a bit more detail in a moment. Now, we look after our clients, which is why we've won numerous awards for customer service, and we look after our staff, which is why the average length of service is 11 years. We've come a long way since we established ourselves as an IT business in 1984, and a lot has changed since then, but we're proud to continue and uphold our excellent standards of service and expertise. Now, let me now tell you about why we're qualified to talk to you here today. So, as mentioned, we're a Microsoft Gold partner and have achieved all the gold competencies, which I'll run through in a minute, on the left to the highest standard certified by Microsoft. So we're currently gold certified in cloud platform, cloud productivity, collaboration and content, communications, data center, enterprise mobility management, Windows and devices as well, and application development, and finally data analytics. So now you know a little bit more about us, I'd like to run through the plan for this morning. Starting off with this, some of you may have seen this already or a version of it. This is our new and improved security onion. It's our approach to layered security, working from the inside out. Today we'll be touching on some of these points, including scanning and monitoring, application control and policies. And as you can see here, there's a lot more to this. So if you want to find out more or you'd like a copy of this security onion, do get in touch with our sales team. So let's start off with the agenda for today. So we'll be discussing effortless password management with LastPass, zero trust security with ThreatLocker, and managing employees with insider risk management. And following all of that, we'll have a Q&A with our two specialists, John Orr and Nathan Brown. And to start off with today, I'd like to hand over to John Orr, who's one of our senior engineers, and he'll be discussing LastPass. So John, go for it.
Good morning, everybody. As Isaac said, my name's John Orr. I'm one of the Associate Technical Directors at ADM, and I'm just going to run through LastPass. LastPass is basically the market leader in password management software. I expect, a lot of people will have possibly used personal password managers. It has the ability to save all your passwords in a central secure location. I'm just going to run through some of the sort of overall features of it, and then we'll go into some of them in a little bit more detail. So basically, it allows you to auto-save passwords as you use them. If you're entering a password in a browser, it will offer to save it for you, and it will also offer to auto-fill it when you next go back to that site. It allows you to access these centrally stored passwords on multiple devices where you sign in. That could be browsers, computers, mobile devices. There's a LastPass mobile app, so it allows that. It's got a built-in password generator, which allows you to generate strong random passwords, which an individual for every site you visit, which protects you. It installs as a browser extension in whichever browser you're using, Chrome, Edge, etc. It allows passwords to be shared in folders, so you can have departmental shares for passwords, and it can control the access people have to that. I'll go into that in a bit more detail at the moment. It's encrypted locally and secure. It also has extra features such as dark web monitoring built in, and as an enterprise product, it allows for users to be centrally managed and federated, set up from AD or Azure AD. It also allows a lot of policies to be set to control how LastPass is used by your users, and it also allows for a high level of reporting. So that's the sort of overall run through of it. Yeah, this screen basically just shows the pop out of the browser extension with the various things you can do, opening your password vault, adding items, getting links to the security dashboard, and the ability to bring up the password generator. As you can see from that, it generates a secure password that's set to 16, a length of 16, but you can control that centrally from a policy if you want to increase or decrease that. This is a screenshot of the actual password vault. So once you've saved a password, you can view it here. So it saves the URL, the name. You can subdivide it into folders. You can reveal the password if you want to, and copy it. It also supports OTP, one-time password codes, where you get the 6-digit number to allow for multi-factor authentication. And obviously you can also control there whether you can auto log on or auto fill the passwords. It also allows not just passwords, it also allows you to save user details, name and address, and payment details. If you want to store a credit card there or bank details, you can do that. But again, centrally you can turn those features on and off if you don't want people to use that side of it. This is the sharing center, which basically is where you could set up a folder for departmentally shared passwords, for example. And one of the good things with this is you've got sort of very granular permissions you can set on it. So you can have certain users in there that admin users, you can actually add and remove passwords and can actually reveal the passwords, but you can also have users in there who can just use the passwords. So they can basically autofill them without actually knowing what the password is. Obviously, this can be quite useful if you want to share a password with a department, and then when that user leaves, you've got no worry that they've got a record of those shared passwords. So that's quite a useful feature of it. This is a screenshot of the built-in security dashboard in LastPass. This is what the user sees, so they get to see an overall security score, and it will highlight any at-risk passwords. So it highlights if you've obviously got a weak password or if you've reused a password. It will prompt you and prompt you to change it. It also has in here the built-in dark web monitoring, where you can monitor your email address against any sites that have been breached. If anything flags up there, it talks you through the, resetting passwords using that email address. So that's quite a useful functionality as well. So it's also got centrally, the admin center has got some reporting, actually not shown on this screenshot. It has an overall sort of graph of the security score for a company as a whole. and it obviously allows you to drill down and see which users may be using weak passwords. As the admin, you don't get to actually see the user's passwords, but you see the security level of it. It gives a full user activity report, so you can see which sites people have been going to and using passwords on, and obviously the security score that we've got here, so you can see, if you've got weak passwords, and a full audit report. This screen shows the sort of central user management, whereby you can see each user, and again, that displays the security score there, which was the thing we saw on the user interface, how secure they are. Obviously shows last login, and how recently the master password's been changed. One of the things I'd probably point out here is that you can just invite users into your enterprise LastPass, or you can actually federate to AD or Azure AD. So this is what we're federated to our Azure AD setup. So adding a user into LastPass is just simply a case of adding a user to a group, which is automatically federated. So when a new user is added to that group, they'll receive an email invite, which will add them into the system. And also what it actually means is they don't have to have a master password that they remember. It actually uses their Azure AD sign-in as the master password. Obviously, the advantage of that is it's not a password that they then have to remember separately to their main login, and it uses the seamless sign-on. So once they've signed into the browser as the Azure AD user, that's basically carried into LastPass. But it does obviously use the multi-factor authentication that you will use when you sign into your Azure AD account, so it's protected that way. This is just a screenshot of the various policies that you can apply. So you can apply policies for access control, where you can restrict it to certain IP addresses. If you wanted to, you can set policies to control the security of passwords, password length and stuff like that, and various restrictions, so timeouts and things like that. So there's a million, not quite literally, but there's a lot of policies there. There are some default and recommended ones to give you a good basic setup, but you can obviously customize that to meet your requirements. So I've basically mentioned this a little bit before, but basically the federated sign-in allows you to federate with Azure AD and other identity providers. Obviously Active Directory, Okta are two other ones that you can use there. And basically that just means that it controls the sign-in and the user creation. Does away with the need for the master password and for the separate MFA setup. Hopefully that's given you a fairly good overview of LastPass, but obviously if there's any questions when we get to the Q&A at the end, please put in a question and I'll do my best to answer it.
Thank you very much for that, John. And as he said, if there is any questions, please feel free to pop them in now into the Q&A box, and we can come around to them at the end of the presentation. So now I'll pass over to Nathan Brown, who's again one of our engineers at ADM, and he's going to go through a little bit about ThreatLocker and insider risk management.
Hi everyone, as Isaac mentioned, I'm Nathan Brown, an engineer at ADM as well. I primarily work in security and those sort of topics, so I'll be covering ThreatLocker initially. So just to go through some of the key features of ThreatLocker, essentially overall it's a product that deploys a silent agent to machines and computers, and on those machines it then allows you to audit programs and applications that are installed or executed, and also control those as well. So I'll just go through a few of the features it includes. Obviously auditing, it will create reporting and tracking of all the programs there, so quite useful for sort of asset lists and those sort of reports. Following on from that, it's got what we call initial learning mode, which I'll mention a bit more later, but essentially you can run it in learning mode and it will collect all the trusted locations and applications that are on those machines for users, and it will then allow those when it goes into enforce mode. It's got quick and simple approval functions, so if a user requests access to an application that isn't on the approval list, it can be approved within 30 seconds to a minute once it's approved on the dashboard. It's very useful against protecting against malicious applications, because if it's not on that approval list and a user accidentally or manages to install a malicious program, it won't be able to run without the approval from ThreatLocker. So straight away that'd be protected if a malicious file does get through your antivirus or other protection like firewall. By default, it's got a default deny list, so anything outside of that trusted applications list won't be allowed. Applications have to be specifically allowed on the whitelist to be allowed to run on a user machine. It's got that level of protection. And also there's something called ring fencing, which I will cover a bit more later, but you can allow applications on the whitelist with limited access rather than full access to the machine. And then finally, whenever an application updates, so if you've got Google Chrome or browser applications like Firefox potentially, whenever they update, which is usually quite often, ThreatLocker will automatically update with the new file location, so the policies are always relevant to those programs. So moving on the application sort of approval requests, when a user wants to use a program and it's blocked, it'll come up a message and it will ask them to approve it. So on the dashboard, the admin or the sort of IT team will see this sort of screen. So in this example, any desk has been run by a user and it's not on the approval list already. So they get this sort of message and you can see the request has put a reason in to say they need to work and it's currently pending. So the end user can put in a valid reason why they need it. And then on the right, you get a list of how you want to approve the application for that user. So you can either approve it for the entire company if you think it's going to be needed, either a specific group or just the end user that requested it at this time. And as well as that, you can either choose to deny it if it's not needed, or you can permit the application with no restrictions, so full access, or you can permit it with ring fencing. Just to go through what ring fencing options you have, you can either restrict internet access, so the application is allowed but have no access to the web, and you can also block access to other files or the actual system registry, so you can allow it but not access to anything else above than the program. So that's it on sort of this slide. This is what the end user will see. So when they try and run a program that isn't already allowed, they'll get the sort of block message shown at the top right, and they can, if they don't need to run the application or it's something malicious, they can not request access and let their IT team know. But if they need to use this application, they can request access, and then the dashboard will get the message that we saw, and an email alert will also go to the IT team. In the bottom right, you can see that you can give a reason and enter your email address, and then you'll get a notification when your application's been reviewed or also approved. And you also get a little tick box to allow a copy of the file. It's quite useful because it gives the IT team options with the ThreatLocker portal to actually scan that program through a sandbox to check if it's malicious, and also check it if it's known against antivirus vendors, so if it's picked up as a malicious file or not. So yeah, moving on to the elevation requests here, you can see that also, as well as approving applications, you can also approve what's called temporary elevation. So if you have a program such as Sage or another file and needs to run as an administrator to access certain aspects, when a user right clicks to run as admin, or if the machine prompts to run as admin and they haven't got admin rights, so they're not a local admin already, the ThreatLocker agent will prompt them to request elevation. And if that's the case, then they can also leave a reason like before. And then you can see on the right, you can give the option to grant them temporary elevation or permanent elevation to that application. So rather than giving them a local admin or any credentials needed, ThreatLocker will actually elevate their session to an administrator for them. So if they need to be an admin to run Sage, rather than giving them Sage or admin rights to the whole machine, you can just make Sage elevate through ThreatLocker as an admin, either permanently or temporary. Like in this example, for 1 hour, you can give them access to do that, to update Sage, for example. And we find that's quite a useful tool to reduce IT overhead, because rather than having to constantly provide admin credentials or temporarily elevate users, you're just approving one prompt for an hour or however long it's needed, and then the user can self-elevate and run that update. In this example, it's for doing a Firefox update, but it gives you an explanation of which program's being elevated. So that's definitely quite useful for the overhead and also security as well, rather than giving out more admin rights that are needed. And this is also what the user will see on the endpoint when they request elevation. So you can see here it's Firefox is saying that it needs to run as local admin. The user hasn't got local admin rights, so it's prompting if they want to request them. Similar to before, they then send a request to their IT team or their IT admin through that dashboard. And then when that's applied, they have the admin rights for however long it's set for. If you are a ThreatLocker admin as well, you'll see in the middle there's a button to log in as admin. So if you are already part of the IT team, you can just manually do it. If you're in front of a user machine or your own machine, you can sort of log in as a ThreatLocker admin to override it straight away. But the request process is so quick anyway, it's within sort of 30 seconds to a minute. The ring fencing I mentioned earlier, here's just the examples of them. So when an application's allowed but with limited access, you can restrict what it can access. So it's literally just sort of sandboxed away from the internet, away from the system files, so that if an application is allowed, then it's sort of restricted in what it can be using. And then also computer groups can be used with any of the policies mentioned already. So you can apply a policy to a group or all devices, and that goes for exclusions as well. So if you add a new application on, as mentioned earlier, you can then allow that for an individual, all devices, or just a specific team or group. And the initial learning mode duration can also be set per group. So if you want to give a 1 or 2 week period where the agent is in learning mode and it lists all the applications that are currently used, then you can set that per group as well. So some devices might need longer to be in learning mode than others. And then just moving on to the sort of final few sections on reporting. With all the approval requests that are there, they'll all be logged. So you can see here as an example, a lot of these applications are just single file approvals. A few of them have been rejected, and a couple of them are still pending at the top as well. So it gives you all the date and time stamps when requests are made and how they've been sort of actioned for auditing purposes as well. And then moving on to the other main audit report, you've also got the application auditing, which I mentioned at the start. So this will go through and it will say which applications are known to the system. So all the built-in Microsoft Edge programs, Office, Internet Explorer, additional ones like Firefox and anything else installed really will be listed here. And those are the ones that can be allowed or denied as well if needed. So that's quite useful for getting an idea of the IT estate, particularly useful for Cyber Essentials accreditation as well, because you can get a list of which applications and which versions are actually allowed or denied in your environment, and you can quite easily just block applications which aren't up to date or aren't compliant with your IT. Okay, just moving on to insider risk management. Just to mention as well on ThreatLocker, if there's any questions about that, there will be an opportunity at the end with the Q&A, but I'll be moving on to insider risk now. So insider risk management is actually a feature of Microsoft 365. There are additional licensing required for it, but it's a feature of the compliance portal, and essentially it allows you to track or keep an eye on certain users and the data they're dealing with, in particular with SharePoint and also email. So if emails or attachments are sent outside the organization, or files in SharePoint or Teams are shared, files from OneDrive, that sort of thing, when they're shared outside the organization, Insider Risk tracks that with auditing, and it can also alert sort of IT teams or human resources if needed. It's particularly useful for users that might be leaving the organization soon, and they might have access to high-risk data, or also just users in general that have access to high-risk data, and you want to make sure that's not sort of being misused or accidentally sent outside the organization when it doesn't need to be. Just to cover a few of the main features that I'll be going through, you've got the alerting, which I'll cover in a little while. Also, it's useful for compliance. It gives you a lot of auditing reports, so what files are shared and where and who to. It mainly covers the 365 environment I mentioned, so SharePoint, email, that side of things, but also it covers local devices as well. If you enroll the device with 365 and Intune, you can sort of monitor additional things as well, which I'll cover a bit later on. With the reporting, you can sort of investigate and look at a timeline of when things are shared and who to. And then you also get remediation actions as well. So you could sort of go into e-discovery or sort of litigation hold and put data on hold if needed following your reporting. And it's also quite a useful tool against sort of protecting against data leaks, whether intentional or accidental. Just moving on to the policies. This is just sort of a summary of what the policies can look like. There's sort of a few different policies in the screenshot. Some of them are healthy, so there's no sort of alerts. A few of them have a warning or a recommendation to say that something's been picked up. And these policies have all applied to different groups. You can create a policy for everyone, or you can create sort of per group or per user policies, but it's worth noting that each user that has a policy will need to be a license for the feature. Yeah, moving on to the next slide. You can see there's a few templates of which policies can be used. So the main two are sort of data theft and data leaks, but some additional ones that Microsoft have added recently is health record misuse and security policy violations, which are both fairly useful for sort of healthcare settings. Each sort of category has templates within it. So the default one is sort of the, general data leaks. And there's sort of a little description for what it will do, but it will basically protect against accidental data sharing or even malicious data sharing as well. But there are also ones that tie into users leaving as well. So one sort of key feature that it also includes an insider risk is the option to prioritize content. So if you have a particular SharePoint site or data that's protected by a certain protection label, you can tell insider risk that that's priority content. Anything that gets flagged up or dealt with by the sort of monitored users or groups will be flagged as high priority, regardless of when or how it happened. So yeah, moving on from that, insider risk works with something called policy triggers. So the monitoring will be triggered by a certain action. You can either integrate it with sort of existing data loss policies. So if you have a policy that says when credit card information or passport information is dealt with, it will flag up an alert. Insider risk can integrate with that and trigger the insider risk monitoring at the same time the data loss alerts are flagged. You can also just have it triggered by activity, sort of as shown in the screenshot, which is the main way of doing it. So if a user starts downloading content from SharePoint or sending emails with attachments, that can start the sort of auditing activity in insider risk. You can also have additional triggers. So if you're having the user leaving template, you can have it set so when a user's leaving or when their account's deleted from the organization, it will then start the tracking then as well. Because it's worth knowing the alerting goes back sort of 90 days by default. So it's not just from the time when the monitoring actually starts, it starts pulling from auditing even before the policy is sort of made. But it's also worth mentioning that there are custom thresholds because you don't necessarily want the monitoring to start immediately when they send one email externally, because quite often people will do that for their jobs anyway. So it can be set to certain thresholds or certain activity beyond the normal threshold. So these are some of the indicators. This is sort of not a full list because there is a massive list of what can be tracked, but these are essentially the items that insider risk will go through and audit. So you can see there's a lot involving SharePoint, things being shared on SharePoint, content being downloaded on SharePoint, deletion of SharePoint is quite a big one, emails being sent with attachments, things being shared or downloaded from Teams, which is also integrated with SharePoint. So there's a massive of a list of what it covers in 365, and this isn't a complete list, but it's the main ones that can be protected by insider risk. And then going on from that, there's some additional indicators. So the one that I mentioned earlier, which are grayed out on the left, if you have a user's device onboarded, which is a silent process in the background to insider risk, then you can also monitor additional indicators. So files being printed, files being copied to USB, and it tracks of all those in sequence as well, which you can sort of see on the right. So if insider risk detects an application being downloaded and then for example, deleted from SharePoint and then printed out afterwards, that will see a sequence which will have a much higher risk score because it sees that that file has been treated or that folder has been treated in a sequence of exfiltration, downloading, and then deleting. So that will all be recorded on there as well. So just to go on to the cases, when you're reviewing an insider risk case or looking at the data, you get a sort of graph as shown here, and also you get details on the left. So any of those sort of blue events you can go into and then view the sequence of events in the timeline. And then you can see sort of what's happened with the files or where they've been sent. If you have any suspicions or there's certain data you want to keep an eye on where it's going. In this case, this one's covering SharePoint, Teams, email, and OneDrive. But you can see from the different sort of color codes on the chart about sort of how the data is being treated. So the lines in between dots as well cover sequences. So if something's being deleted, then downloaded, and then copied somewhere else, that also has sort of lines between the dots, which is a sequence detection. And then the higher up it is on the chart, the higher risk it is. So you can see deletion is sort of generally the higher risk action, but it's all on there as well. So you can go into the reports, see if it's genuine activity or whether it is something to be suspicious of. And then just going on to this last reporting section as well, you also get a more like a timeline report here, so you can see data can be anonymized as well. So if you want to anonymize data, you can have it set there, and then you can sort of protect the privacy of users and then de-anonymize it if you need to, or you can just have it sort of not anonymized in the first place. But you can see alerts are categorized based on high, medium, and low. And there is an option to mark alerts as higher priority for users if it's beyond the user's normal activity for the day. So it uses a bit of AI in Microsoft, so it can work out sort of how much the user normally interacts and shares per day. And if a user does more than that in these certain files, it will flag up a higher risk or insider risk, shown by the high alerts on this graph. Generally, the score is assigned between low, medium, and high, and it's always out of 100. So a score of sort of 80 and above is generally considered very high or insider risk. Okay, and that's it for insider risk. So I'll hand back over to Isaac for any questions and answers.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nathan, for that. So yes, it's that time. It's our Q&A session. So if we have any questions, Penny is going to jump in and raise them. Just to remind you on the topics that we covered, it was LastPass, ThreatLocker, and insider risk management. So if anyone has any questions on those, feel free to pop them into the box now. We'll give it just a minute or so. Penny, are there any questions so far for any of us?
We haven't got any questions at the moment.
No questions yet. That means we've done our jobs right, hopefully. So what I'll do then is I'll continue to move through to the other slides. If any questions pop through in the meantime, I'll double check right again at the end. And if you think of anything in the meantime after the presentation, feel free to reach out to us and we can get them answered in an email follow-up. So just a couple of things to note. Please do stick around to the end because there's one announcement that we want to make here. So a quick note on some of our upcoming events. I'll be talking at the Microsoft offices in London on the 21st of June about how Power Apps and SharePoint can help your business processes. So that's going to be quite an interesting one, going through things like Power BI, Power Apps, and the general Power Platform. And again, on the 12th of July for a Microsoft 365 security workshop, which I think will be myself and Nathan, who was just speaking a moment ago as well. And finally, we do have some excellent Microsoft training sessions with our in-house trainer, who's Microsoft certified as well. He'll be going through some top tips and tricks. It's absolutely free for up to 2 members of staff. And these are happening quite regularly, but we're not sure how long they'll continue to happen. So if you or anyone in your business is interested in these, please do get in touch with us to book your place now. And a final thank you from all of us. I'd like to personally thank you all for attending this morning's session. As I said, if you think of any more questions or would like to have a discussion with us, please do get in touch with our sales team on 01227 473 500, or you can get in touch by email by emailing in sales@adm-computing.co.uk. Once again, that's 01227 473 500 or sales@adm-computing.co.uk. And Penny, are there any questions that have come in since I've been speaking?
No.
Brilliant,
No
lovely.
questions.
Fantastic. So thank you all once again. Have a good rest of your week. Stay safe. Enjoy the weekend. The weather's pretty good at the moment, and we'll catch you all again very soon. Thank you.